Jay, because I wasn't able to catch the openings. So you can skip me over for the openings, Max.
No problem. Thank you so much. Dr. J, how are you doing? Hope everyone is okay.
Good. I caught the openings. I how am I going to describe? They the openings were Luke's opening was sort of a lot of the classic arguments, right? So, um, I think in his opening, I might be getting his opening confused with other things, but he was talking about how you can't be moral. Everyone's who's an atheist is a moral
Mm-hmm.
monster. He went with that route. He also did he go to the first cause route? God, we can't understand without metaphysics. You can't understand without logic. I kind of forget all that it was in his arguments, but they felt like all the classic ones. I just can't quite remember them all. Of the ones
Yeah.
that he presented.
He didn't go deep into the first cost argument, but he touched a little bit upon that. And let's hand it over to Isa. How are you? Everything okay?
Yeah, it's good. I'm just gonna get switching to my computer soon. I'm on my phone right now, but
Okay.
yeah, I agree with Dr. J. I think it's kind of the standard arguments. Um, and I also think that's kind of how it was throughout the debate. It's kind of more of the same.
Okay. Yeah, we kind of today there was no pre-show because we had already done it before with Dr. J and me. We kind of scrambled because it caught us off guard that that debate. We kind of forgot it and jumped right into it. But we had mentioned a couple of stuff like this that the default arguments were going to be brought up, and we were hoping for. We actually agreed that it's a hard position to defend. That's why many Christians have moved on from the fundamentalist younger creationist argument, and especially in the face of science. So let's talk a little bit about President Sunday's opening. Could you catch this one, Rodney?
I didn't. I came in about I think halfway through the debate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. Dr. J.
His opening seemed to be pretty short, and he kind of wanted to get to the discussion. So I recall his opening being pretty brief, and he didn't say too much that I remember. So if it was awesome, I'm sorry, but it didn't capture me.
Yeah, it didn't capture me either.
Same with me. I didn't. It was the same thing. I don't recall it.
Yeah, if I could put it into one word, President Sunday's opening was forgettable. As soon as the open discussion started, I had nothing. I had forgotten everything. It was weird. The only thing that kind of stuck to me was that criticism of the platform, which really stood out. It was like, what? And then
I remember that. I remember that. And
yeah.
I'll comment on that since I watched it, I guess.
Go ahead,
I
please.
think it's also very weird. I mean, let's just pretend I completely agree with the substance. I'm not sure I do, but even if I partly do, it is odd to jump on a platform and say this platform's dumb and boring, and then anyway, let me go on. Do I agree that it's sort of the same thing over and over again? That's fine, but then you wouldn't appear or you wouldn't come on. It's just weird a way to do it. Shouldn't you go on the after show and talk about how you wish there were other things, or go on to the pre-show and talk about how I wish there were other things, not on the just diss the channel itself? And I don't know. That's what I thought about it anyway.
Yeah, or maybe bring it up with the owner, someone who can do something about it. Like if you have a contention with this show in particular, reach out to me. Don't come here on stage and say, "Oh, this platform sucks. You're all a bunch of losers." I mean, that doesn't really add up to
It was
anything.
worse than that because James wasn't even there.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Michael Fraker sends us a message. He also came down hard on them about being labeled atheist. Like, why wait for the whole show to be over before correcting the mod host? This is true. And we also had 2 instances of this show being postponed. So there was enough time to get this corrected. But yeah, it's overall a weird situation that something like this would happen. I would hold it, but maybe because I'm a fan of not making private matters public. I think that in general, those things should stay separate. So if you have a problem, then maybe address it with a person first. And then if you don't get any response at all, only then would be kind of the way to try to draw some awareness onto the issue. But
So you're saying like he like actually like in his opening statement actually like had a grievance with modern day debate and voiced it?
Yes, he did.
Exactly.
Oh wow.
He's like, I want you to know something. You know, every single time there's an endless cycle between the interlocutor. James puts these 2 people together. One is the atheist, one is the creationist, and it's always the same dull, repetitious argument. That's what we see here all the time. And Luke started laughing.
Wow. Okay. Kind of like a Chad move, I guess, but like unnecessary.
Weird, absolutely weird. Before we go into the discussion of the best argument for each one, I would like to discuss with you, what do you think the best arguments for creationism are in general? Because the debate today went, I was hoping to get into the nit and grit of creationism along the lines of, Kent Hovind type of discussion. But it was a bit more centered in God itself, which I kind of understand, because if you can dismiss the concept of God, then you can dismiss the concept of creation. But I thought that they would be going into the details of creationism itself. So, Rodney.
Yeah. So I guess I've said before, my go-to thing for when I was a creationist and an apologist, my like go-to thing with folks was to say that everything exists. So like basically, what is the necessary antecedent for existence? It's got to be a God. And I would kind of go to that like initial, the very beginning, how did it come? And people would very comfortably cede, okay, yeah, oh, sure, a God did it. And then from there, it was really easy to kind of push further and be like, okay, so if God did that, then God could do all these other things as well, right? And they would, oh, okay, well, yeah. So I found that was like the best argument I could give somebody to be like, well, yeah, well, God is real, and so they would give me that, and it was very easy from that point to move on to like getting them to accept other points that God could have or did do. So yeah, I found that was for me, it was the best argument that I could bring up.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. J, I know I asked you this on the pre-show, but if you would like to remind for those of the audience who weren't here.
Yeah, I feel like they didn't want to have this debate. At least Mr. Sunday didn't want to have the debate, so they took a different directions. But if they were actually going to talk about creationism the whole time, I think abiogenesis is the way you go all day long. You just say you can't explain this in detail, and you attack that mercilessly all day long, and that's what the creationist should do. He didn't do that here, but it wasn't even a creationist debate as far as I could tell. I mean, they went into that a little bit, but it wasn't really. So I don't really feel like he went into that, but they weren't hardly even talking about that.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Isa, thoughts?
I would use the argument of the prime mover argument for creationism. I think it's like the best argument creationism has. It's saying, look, how did this world come to be? There has to be something that started it. And I think a lot of people, even in the scientific realm, held to that belief. Even deists, a lot of academics and scientists held to this perspective. So that it makes a lot of sense. You say, look, there was this prime mover that had to create everything. Because how could it just start? It couldn't start on its own. So that would be the argument I would go with.
Thank you very much. And as for me, like for example, Oz is a little bit more sophisticated in his the way of expressing his atheism. I'm more of a regular person. He has a lot of experience with debate, so he's better at argumenting his positive atheism a lot more than I do. But yeah, I would say that the uncaused cause, or what you guys were saying, the prime mover, or the, what is it called,
Necessary
the
antecedent.
necessary
The
antecedent, or the
cosmological argument, isn't this the name for all the same thing?
The
yeah,
Kalam.
pretty much.
Yeah.
I was just listing arguments to sound smart. You burned me.
That this
You didn't have
Arabic
to call him out like that.
argument. I think that's really funny.
So yeah, I think that one is the most, because the reason I think that is because even with all of the science that we've had over the years and the potential uh, progress that we might make in the future, we might never be able to look past our idea of the Big Bang. So it's something that we might never know. We might never get a definitive answer. So in that sense, there's a mystery there that we might never solve, and there's this proposition that seems to answer that very question. And can see how some people definitely see that as a valid thing, as a good thing. So I think I agree with all of you. And then the other thing I wanted to ask is, what would be the best argument for non-creationism? And we're going to start with Isa down
Cool.
here for this time.
I think the argument you can use is you could use like traditional atheistic arguments and say the world is chaotic. It makes no sense how things came to be. If God really created this world, then why did God create it so dysfunctionally? So, it's actually funny. It's a kind of an inverse on the prime mover, or the antecedent, the unmoved antecedent, or the Kalam cosmological argument. Everything is so dysfunctional. There's a problem of evil. All of these things don't work the way that they should be if a divine being was at the helm of this situation. So, thus, how could this be? The only way that this came into being is through chaos. It came into being through just natural, random events. And you can see it because the proof is in the pudding.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. J?
Well, if a theist wanted to say why they thought creationism was a poor argument against evolutionists, he might say something like, "I think you've misunderstood the literary nature of Genesis 1 and 2. You're reading it as a historical narrative rather than a different kind, like a Babylonian epic or something like that." And so that might be a way you would go at it if you're a theist, to say like, no, you don't have to be locked into literal 6-day creationism. This literature doesn't even read like historical literature. I mean, Christians have no problem saying that Proverbs contradicts itself. It does it absolutely contradicts itself within the same chapter. But we just say, oh, it's wisdom literature. Some situation this works, some situation this works. We can all find wise parables that don't really fit together, but we understand that they, depending on the situation, they work. And so Proverbs doesn't need to perfectly not contradict whatever. And there's no problem because it's a type of literature. So if you were going to argue against creationism and you're a theist, I think that might be one of the stronger arguments. You could show all the other different narratives and stories that have been told that are so similar to Genesis 1. You say it just fits inside, the same type of literature, and therefore it wasn't meant to be like there was these were real people. It was just meant to provide a principle.
Thank you very much. Rodney?
Honestly, I can think of two from like two different perspectives. And I can't really pin down one over the other. I guess the realist view, like the one that I would probably cling more to myself, would be that there's just more evidence against creation than there is for creation, and that I don't see any reason why there would have been a creation, that if a God does exist, then this God would have been intelligent enough to set everything in motion at what I've taken to call, instead of the Big Bang, because people like to goof with the name, I've taken to calling it the initial expansion event, uh, just to kind of get away from the sensationalized name of it. But if you wanted to like put a God there and say that everything from there was put in motion by that God, absolutely perfectly fine. But on the other end of spectrum of the spectrum, like if I were coming from just like a generalist point of view, I would say that like just the fact that a lot of things don't make sense for there being a all good or all powerful or all knowing God, just there's just things in the world that don't make sense if that God is the case. If that God is real, then there's just so many things that don't line up with why it would exist should that God be real. So either one of those two arguments, like evil existing in the world, if there's an all good God or an all loving God, something like that, I don't see why evil should exist if God is all good and all loving. So those are my two kind of answers, I guess, from two different like angles that I come at it.
All right. And Samir asks you a question, which we have on screen. If you want to send a question, you can tag me at MXXXD, or you can tag Matters Now. Or if you want to make sure that your question gets read on screen, you can send a super chat and we'll take a moment to read that one for sure. So Samir asks you, please explain what you mean by evidence against creation. Examples.
Well, I'll qualify it by once again stating that the only position that I come from and argue against is the one that I know, which is independent fundamental Baptist doctrine. So the young Earth creationist view that the Earth was created, the universe was created roughly 6,000 years ago, is soundly put to bed by something as simple. Well, I say as simple. For geologists, for something as simple as isotopic dating. So that one thing alone kind of does away with a 6,000 year Earth and creation occurring 6,000 years ago. So that would be evidence against creation. The creationist argument for created kinds or created heterozygosity, all of these things have been soundly put to bed through various avenues. The fusion of chromosome 2, the concept of mitochondrial Eve, or with a Y chromosomal atom. All of these things dating back further than 6,000 years old, kind of all of them for me blanketly just kind of push aside a 6,000 year creationist timeline, and all of those I would cite as evidence against that young Earth, the 6,000 year creation date.
All right. Thank you very much. And I wasn't laughing at you. I was laughing at what Justin said in the side chat. Before I give my opinion, Samir asked me a question which I would like to address. Not this one, this one. Max, there are a lot more creationists than atheists. Yet, for some reason, atheists seem to dominate the chat on modern day debate, number-wise. Why is that, do you think? I don't know. I don't know if I would agree with the fact that there are more creationists than atheists. In my country, for example, atheists are little by little becoming the majority, and we do have Christians, but the fundamentalist kind are not the norm. So
Mhm.
people here will say that they believe, but most of them don't go to church. Uh, they they hold to a certain part of the doctrine, but they're not really hardcore like in places like the US. They don't go to church every Sunday. Um, so yeah, I couldn't say, but
I think
MDD.
if you Googled it, I think there are a lot more theists. I can Google if you want, but if you just talk about all the Islamic countries, all the Catholic
Yeah,
countries,
definitely.
I mean, if you just talk about in the world, I think it's kind of overwhelming that atheists are a minority in the world.
Yes, in the world, probably yes. But then here in the internet, you do have a lot of the fundamentalist and the religious channels, let's say, and communities. But the atheist community is also pretty big on the internet,
Mhm.
mainly to try and combat some of the things the more fundamentalist sites do, like advocating for restriction of rights and those kind of things. So maybe that's why. Maybe because it's hard to find atheists out in the wild. So
Hmm.
we find each other on the internet and we go to these channels and we get together and talk. Maybe that's why. But yeah, it's a hard thing to point and to figure out really, unless we did some like massive polling to all of the MDD users. But it's an interesting thing to figure out and try to think. But I don't think we can get an answer right now, at least, for example. And then going back to the prompt, there's a few of the arguments against creationism that I like. Most of them are based on science, and they really fall in the face of some of the claims that creationism makes. And one philosophical one, I think that going the Darth Dawkins way and saying without God you can't have knowledge and you can't have anything basically. I mean, since that is a presupposition, I can just disregard it. I don't need to even bother myself with refuting that, because that's just a presupposition. So when you go that route, it becomes easy to argue against that. You're just, okay, I refute that presupposition, and what do we do next? Where's the next step to go? And when it comes to science, science does contradict these more fundamentalist views of these texts. And as something that we've seen here many times is that we don't consider these texts as scientific texts. So it's okay that they have maybe some mistake here and there, and a potential contradiction in some place. These texts are to be looked at in a more complete way as a spiritual truth, which I still don't believe, but that makes it less of a problem for me. And I don't feel the need to argue against someone who takes that approach. Or like Isa sometimes says, if this is something that is good for you, if it makes you feel better, if it makes you try to be a better person, then I'm all for that. It's when people try to legislate other people's lives that I start having a problem. And
Mhm.
I would like to welcome Brenda to the stage. How are you doing tonight?
Good evening.
Good
Hey,
evening.
Brenda.
All good?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Since you just joined, I was just finished. And what would you say you think the best argument for non-creationism is?
For what? Not
Against creation.
Non-creation against creationism, let's say.
Yeah.
Before, let me ask you, what's your religious background, if you don't mind?
I'm an atheist.
All right, thank you. And you can go ahead and answer if you
So
want.
the best argument against creationism is evolution, right?
That is fair. Yeah. This is
Yeah.
when I ask you, this is the personal opinion. You can I chose another thing. It's fine. Can you elaborate a little bit more why you think that's the case?
Well, usually when people say creationism, they mean how does life? They don't mean abiogenesis. They mean um, how do we explain all the different forms of life on Earth? And
Uh-huh.
that the best explanation for that is evolution. Evolution explains the diversity of life. It doesn't explain the origin of life. That's abiogenesis. It doesn't explain the origin of the universe. That's cosmology, right? So creationism is usually, and it's usually put in terms of humans are separate from animals, not part of the natural order. Evolution says we are part of the natural order. We are part of the world. We did evolved. We were not created. And it seems to me that that's the best explanation for that set of questions.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I would like to go next to the best argument. Now, yes, in regards to the debate, the best argument Luke presented in the open discussion. And since you just came along, I'm going to send it over to you, Brenda, and we'll do the round the other way.
Yikes! I didn't watch the debate
Oh, okay. No problem.
because
So,
I got bored and went to something else.
fair enough. We can keep on chatting during the open discussion. I just have two more of these prompts related to the debate, and then we'll open it up to whatever we want to speak. So, Isa, your turn. Take it away.
Yeah, I've got a good answer for this. I think, and this is something that Dr. J and I have talked about a lot, it's the argument of magical thinking. The problem is, if you're trying to logically analyze God, you're going to fail. You can't try to do that, because what you're doing is you're implementing human thought onto God. Now, when you do that and you try to logically fit God into a box, you're going to fail, because you're using two different ways of thinking. It's comparing an apple to an orange. So I feel that Luke basically deflected everything that what's his name, President Sunday
President
brought.
Sunday.
Yeah, President Sunday was like, yeah, I want to tell you, how does your God do this type of thing? It doesn't really work. It doesn't really make sense. And I'm like, yeah, bro, you can't win this argument. What argument do you think you're going to win on in this space? And I think that was a perfect situation. You're not going to win. God can be whatever you want God to be in that moment. So I'm just like, and I find it so bizarre when atheists try to like logically rationalize God. I'm like, this is a fool's errand. You're like Don Quixote running at the windmill. You're not going to win with this position. You're not going to win with this argument. You think you're going to persuade a theist that, yeah, God is illogical. No, God is transcendent of magical. God is transcendent of your logical human thought. So it's not gonna work. So you're not gonna persuade a theist of atheism in that type of perspective. You're gonna have to take a very different route if that's what your goal is. So
To jump on that for a second, Isa. Sometimes, though, the theists will pretend they're not doing magical thinking and act like they're doing secular philosophy and following all these laws of logic. And you and I both are like, what are you talking about? No, you just got to move to the magic, buddy. This is, so that is something that some theists do try to do. And you and I are kind of like, maybe aren't as excited about that line of argumentation.
Before I ask you proper the question, Dr. J. Michael Fraker, sorry if I mispronounce that. Isa's point is exactly why you can't get absolute objective morality from God. Seems like he agreed with you. And our very own Robin Webster gifted one membership, and it has gone to Isa. Let's go.
Dude, she hit you in Mark Reed's chat last night,
you did.
and then she hits you here tonight.
Robin must just love me,
All right, so I'm going to hand it over. I'm going to welcome Samir to the stage. Welcome here. So we'll do the round and we'll send it over back to you, Samir. And I'm going to send it over to Dr. J.
Luke's best argument, maybe one of his best arguments, at least one that I'm remembering well, is he kind of went with the "you think killing people's okay" kind of thing, right? Like, you have no reason not to, commit mass murder. And while I'm not sure that's correct, I mean, it's a very emotive thing, right? Especially if you're already on his team, I think you can find that pretty persuasive that the atheists are just gonna genocide everybody or whatever the argument is there.
All right. Thank you so much. Rodney, what do you think about the best argument Luke presented tonight?
Again, I didn't catch the openings, but if I can kind of ride off of what Dr. J just said.
In the open discussion, it's fine.
Okay.
Argument in general, yeah.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I guess I could kind of ride off what Dr. J just said, because well, no, I'll save for because I don't want to go on and on about it. I'll save for the open discussion. I'm sorry. Yeah,
okay,
go ahead
no
on
problem.
to Samir.
So I think a lot of what Dr. J said is true, that there was a lot of appeal to emotion as, okay, these atheists don't believe in God, they can't have morality, they can't have any grounding for anything they do. It's basically, he didn't say it, but he basically reduced atheism to nihilism, which it is true for some people, but it's not true for every atheist. I don't consider myself a nihilist. And even though I can agree that there is no ultimate goal for life, I do feel that I have found some goals which I find interesting, which is, one of them is being here with you and talking about this stuff. Another thing that makes me really happy is me playing with my gear here, my music, playing that, making people dance. And I don't know, it may be trivial. They find it, a lot of them find this repulsive, and I've been told that that's not no goal in life, but it just makes me happy. So I find it absolutely fair that that's the goal of my life: making people happy, making music, hanging here with you, speaking about this stuff, making videos on YouTube. That kind of thing is what fulfills me personally. So I don't think it's fair for anyone to come and say the goals of your life are meaningless because you don't believe in God. So yeah, I think in a sense that is the best argument, I believe, for Luke's position. It's the one that I disagree with the most, if that makes any sense at all, which is very little. But yeah, that idea of the fear of nihilism is one that's very pervasive in this specific type of debate. And I'm going to hand it over to Samir. Did you watch the debate, and what do you think Luke's best argument was tonight?
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Unfortunately, I did not watch the debate, but I hope I can participate in the conversation with you because the topics are the same. And I honestly purposely did not watch the debate, and I'll just go ahead and say why. I feel like when I participate in a debate, I actually get really involved in the debate. And has nothing to do with money. I send super chat questions, and a lot of times I do just to balance the question and the Q&A, because it seems like most Q&A will rain against the theist. And unfortunately, it's been the pattern. I don't think by any means that the moderator ignores my super chats, but just because there is usually they have more super chats, they bite on more than they can choose super chats wise all the time. It does happen. So they skip a bunch of them, and then I feel like I sent 4 or 5 super chat questions to the atheist, and I'll be lucky to have 1 or 2 at the most land being asked. So I kind of get disappointed from that, because I feel like I could at least help my side a little more, and I feel like I've done everything on my end, but there is not more I can do. And I don't blame the moderator. I don't blame modern day debate. I just get too emotionally engaged in the debate, and I feel like it's not healthy for me if I can't achieve my goal. But I
Right.
wanted to bring out a point when we talk about a best point for a theist.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
sh-
Okay.
but since that's the question you guys were going after before, it's two different points. Point number one: if there is a God that made this universe, we will expect that God will lay claim to his creation, and the only claim, like for example, when T Jump would say the spaghetti monster did not lay any claims. The only God that laid claim, it's the same guy, same God, forgive my language, the same God that all religions follow. Because a lot of people tend to think that there is all these religions. But you gotta know that, for example, Jewish people, they believe in every prophet that was before them except for the two after them. Christians, they believe in every prophet that was before them except for the one after them. And Muslims, they believe in every prophet that was before them, including Jesus and Moses and every prophet before that. So now the point that I wanted to make is that if a God lays a claim for his universe and tries to have a law governing its creatures, the law would be different. Like the point, like kind of the point Isa made, it would be different from the way we would make laws. For example, man-made laws, you would not find a law that says be good to thy neighbor. You would not find a law that says do not gossip. And in any constitution in the world, you would not find a law that says you cannot be a good citizen unless you like for your uh, uh, countrymen or countrywomen that which you like for yourself. So these are things that I can expect only would come from a God that asks you to be humble, a God that asks you to be kind, a God that asks you. So these things might fall under morals in the atheist society, but they would not fall under a law or constitution. And I stop here.
Okay. Anyone want to address this first?
I think I'm up for finishing the prompt so we can get back to it. Maybe if you have one
Okay.
more.
Yeah, I'll make a note of what Samir said. I put it here so we can finish the prompts and then we can get right into that. So before we go into the next prompt, I do have something I want to address. Taking back Eden, FE, truth equal money, and thank you for the stream. You are very welcome. Thank you for being here with us. And I don't know what you mean to us, but sometimes doesn't equal money. Sometimes in search of the truth, you spend money. So I don't know. Maybe if you want
I
to
think
send a
he was
regular
saying
chat.
we were telling the truth, and because he was happy we were telling the truth, he was giving us money. That was my impression I got from it.
Okay, that's a fair assessment. I
You
thought
are far
more of
more
a question.
magnanimous than me.
Yeah. So, John, if you want to clarify your question, send me a regular chat and tag me, and I'll make sure to put it again through the panel, see what we think, or maybe tell us who was right, Dr. J or I, in the
I think he
interpretation.
was asking you to fill the blank. Money and what? Money and love, money and family, money and. I think
Well,
he's asking you to fill the blank.
John is a flat earther, and a lot of flat earthers claim that because like certain places or scientists or groups are paid by governments, that the truth that they come across is the one that's accepted as the truth because it was paid for. That's me. That's why I said Dr.
You're
J is far
probably
more
right, but
magnanimous than me.
you're probably right, but I like my interpretation better. Mine is nice.
Yeah. Let's
Yeah.
let's be nice and go with Dr. J's. I'll side with
Yeah.
Dr. J here.
That makes sense. Yes. So thank you, John, for your $2 Canadian. And yeah, it's a fair point. So the next prompt we have best argument, President Sunday presented. Who wants to go first? Let's start with Rodney.
I can't honestly remember if President Sunday actually made the argument or used it from a question in chat. But when he pushed back against the goodness of God, Like if God can, if only God can know what's good, or if God is good, then how can we say what is good? I thought that was really good. Because like if only God can name what is good, then how are we able to then say that God is good, other than what God says of himself in his book? So like it becomes it's really subjective, like whether we want to interpret what we think God thinks is good or not. So yeah, I like I said, I can't remember if President Sunday made that argument first, or if it came from a super chat that he then piggybacked off of. But I thought that was a good argument.
All right. Thank you very much. Dr. J?
I've noticed sometimes in debates, one of the debaters will say, "I addressed that in my opening argument," and I don't know if they did or not. But because I can like make these arguments like in my sleep for the most part, I'm like, could follow them all really easily. It was like, "Yep, you're right. You didn't actually answer that in your opening argument. You're saying you're answering an opening argument, but you never did." And the one he really pressed him on was trying to get him to explain: is God outside of logic or not? Is he separate or not? And he kept trying to get him to explain that. And I kept waiting for the guy to be like, magic. I'm like, dude, go with the magic. Go with the magic. That is going to be what is the key here. And he just tried to have magic without it being magic. You know what I mean? I was like, I think you're going to need to move to the magic at this point, buddy. And he just never did.
All right. Thank you very much. Isa?
Well, you know what his best argument is. His best argument is attacking modern day debates.
Oh,
No, I had to troll on that. I think I found him to be a bit caustic in certain places, but I think where he did well was being sort of I don't know if I would say it's an argument, but I would say his kind of pursuit of certain spaces. Like I think he, going on the problem of evil, he kind of went hard on that, where he was like, kind of how God is sort of, how can this system be functional? Again, it's not a position that I like because I don't think it works, but it made him look strong. So the thing is, he seemed strong and foundational in his position. So I would say that kind of worked.
All right. And Brenda and Samir didn't watch the debate, so we're going to skip them for now until the open discussion. And my idea is that I have to commend him first, given that he was a Christian and he took the position of being an atheist for a little while. I have to commend him on that. We already discussed the whole problem with the platform. I'm going to gloss over that now. But I feel like, yeah, his strongest argument was, is God above logic? And he didn't press a little bit more into some of the other, like, I don't know, the problem of evil or some of the other regular contentions that we may have with the whole young earth creationist model. And also, Luke didn't really specify which type of creation, because you can have young earth creationism, you can have creationism with just God as the kickstarter of the universe, and then he made everything as it is, the laws and everything, and then kickstarted the universe and then just watch, which is more of a deist, not really a Christian. But there are some subsects of Christians that do believe that. So I was left wanting a little bit more clarification on what is actually Luke's position. So I don't think it's that far off for President Sunday to not really have made that many points, but I think the strongest one was the whole thing about God and logic, which is a little bit too on the philosophical side for me. I like more like the theological arguments or the science arguments. are the ones I deal with
Mhm.
best.
Yeah.
So, open discussion. And we're going to go with the first question from Samir. If there is a God, they would lay claim to their creation. And who would like to address this first? Maybe Brenda, that you haven't spoken in a while. Do you have any thoughts on Samir's question? Well,
Sorry.
no problem. Yeah, no
Well,
problem. No problem.
could you repeat the question again?
Yes, if there's a God that would lay claim to their creation through scripture, and Samir said that God would give us laws like don't gossip and be good to your neighbor and such. Do you have anything in response to this? Or
I
maybe if you
found it.
want, Samir.
I found it confusing, Samir. What were you trying to say? God would lay claim to his creation. So were you trying to say so there is a God, or just hey, FYI, if there is a God, he'll lay claim to his creation? Or I wasn't
Yes.
really sure the point,
Okay.
or not,
Well,
or
yeah, I'll try to explain it a little better. What I meant is that the only claim to creation we have is from the religions. And the religions are not separate from each other. They're all connected because, like I said, Jewish people, they believe in every prophet that came before them. And Christians, they believe, but Jewish don't believe in prophets that came after them. Christians, they believe in every prophet that came before them, including the Jewish people prophet. And the Muslims, they believe in every prophet, including Jewish and Christian. So, for example, for me as a Muslim, all religions came from the same source. All the prophets came from the same source. All that claim for the creation came from the same source. And we haven't seen something else that made claim for this creation. So we would assume since the creation is unclaimed except for by God, then we can't refute the claim. For example, if somebody told you that you there is a room full of people and you found a wallet and you said, whose wallet is this? And there is one person that says it's my wallet. There is no ID, nothing inside. There is just money. And nobody in that room, no one else in that room said it's my wallet. Why would I then question maybe he's lying, maybe the wallet belongs to somebody else? It's the only person in a room that claimed that it's his wallet.
okay, I see it.
Well-
I think I understand your argument now. Are you saying no other religions besides Judaism, Christianity, and
The
Islam have a
Abrahamic.
creation myth? I think there are other religions with creation myths. So
Well,
Yeah.
how
yeah,
does that
and
fit into your paradigm?
all religions don't have the same origin. I mean, they just don't.
Okay.
Yeah, 'cause there's more than just the Abrahamic religions. Like there's the animism, Zoroastrianism, the Norse pantheon, Greek pantheon, Taoism, Hinduism, Buddhism.
Even the proto religions of the Mesoamerican native, they all have creation myths. It's just an anthropological truth that people, before we had the means to tell anything, we invented these types of stories. So I would push back a little bit, and I'm sorry I'm taking your turn. I will hand it right back to you, Brenda. I would push back a little bit in that I don't think the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament are the same character. And I also don't think that the God of Islam is the same as the previous both. So I would push back a little bit on that. And with that, I'm going to hand it over back to Brenda. Sorry, I took your turn.
Well, yeah, the Abrahamic religions are generally grouped together because they all have as their they all came from that area and they have very similar origins, but there's differences and stuff. So I guess I just don't quite get it. The only thing, if we're talking in general and about the debate, I remember why I got frustrated with it and went and did something else. And that was because in a debate about creationism, they started talking about presuppositionalism and morality. And that just I found that really annoying because I wanted them to talk about the pros and cons of creationism and to not get sidetracked into whether or not God is in logic or whether or not there's such a thing as objective morality. Those seem to be side issues that they should have stayed away from. But I mean, I guess I understand, but I found it annoying, and so I did something else.
Yeah, just at that. Who wants to take a crack at Samir's question?
Yeah, I would push back a little bit against the objective morality thing because like even like there can be morality without the belief or the requisition of a god, because like we do observe societal behaviors where moral things are dealt with in like chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, where like if one member of a society is caught stealing from another or doing something that they have some kind of
Have you?
umbrance against, they will punish
Can I
that
ask you
member.
something?
And
Can I ask you something about that? Can I ask
Sorry.
you something? Can I ask
Yeah.
you something? Have you ever watched on YouTube videos of gorillas? And they often are in a big, either in the wild or they're often in a large enclosure in a zoo. Have you ever watched them?
I've seen clips, yes.
In my opinion, if people were more like gorillas, this would be like a step up. I mean, I watched them.
I tend to
And
agree with that because they
yeah,
seem simpler, and simpler usually has less problems.
they can be extreme. There's videos of like this great big huge silverback gorilla playing with his son, his
Yeah.
infant son and stuff, and it's like that's natural origin. That came from nature, and here you have this scene of a 800-pound gorilla that could rip the arms off of anybody, but he's playing with a little baby gorilla, and
Being gentle.
that's moral. That's morality, I think.
Yeah.
I think it is.
Exhibiting nurture and care. Yeah. I think that's the tied to morality. Yeah.
I'm just kind of observing that. I think, well, I guess I'm not really sure what I was trying to say. I'm sorry.
No,
Yeah, sorry, I want to push back on
I
that.
think I get a little bit of what you're saying, but yeah, no, I do agree that stuff like that would also constitute some kind of morality, because I mean he's caring for his child, or at least a member of his troop, and interacting with them and giving them some kind of stimulation.
Oh, now I remember. Yeah, but there's also videos of a gorilla. There's a child that fell into a cage once, and the male gorilla protected it from the other gorillas in the enclosure, and also picked it up or something, and was very gentle with it. That's a kind of a cross species morality, I think. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to push back. I think that same example that happened in Cincinnati Zoo when that gorilla was unfortunately shot.
Harambe.
Harambe.
Okay,
Well, there was one
and
that wasn't. There was one that wasn't shot though.
okay, so
There was a
that
couple
gorilla,
instances.
that gorilla was pulling the child by the leg and dragging him at full speed. I don't think a human would do that to any young I mean, a human with morals would not do that to any young animals. Like even if you find a baby lion, you're not gonna grab it by the foot and drag it at your
I mean,
and run
humans
with it.
without morals would. So I mean, couldn't there be a
Yes.
gorilla without morals? I mean, if there's a gorilla with morals, then there could be a gorilla without morals, just like there's
Yeah,
humans with and without morals. So
but now we're talking about morals that are somehow came with the evolution from nature to the species. So we cannot say that it's general for all gorillas.
Okay, give
Yeah,
me
but
one
we're not saying
second.
that morality is. Oh, I'm sorry,
Give
Max.
me
Go ahead.
1 second. 1 second. I want to welcome Simon Funk to the stage. I hope you're having a great night.
Thank you
And
so much. Thank you so much.
I wanted to address this comment that made me laugh really hard. Robin Webster says gorillas don't have internet.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I mean, yeah. What can you say? Gorillas obviously immoral because they don't have the internet.
We know that for sure. And
I
they
actually
fling feces also, which that's kind of weird. So
nothing
you
immoral
can't
about
trust
that,
them.
though. Come on now.
When I was
We've
a
all
kid,
done
there
that in
was a
our time,
gorilla
surely.
at the Arkansas Zoo that was like a freaking sniper with his poo. I mean, he could hit
Yeah.
somebody from across his enclosure. Like it was a big old huge circle enclosure, and people could stand on the top all the way around and look in. And he could he could just sit there and whop, hit somebody right in the eye. It was
Well,
nasty.
this strikes to me. This strikes at very much the problem I found with the debate. If I may just quickly get to the debate or bring us
Yes.
back to it.
Yeah.
And I want to talk to Jay about another topic in particular a little later. But this brings back to the point about anthropomorphization, i.e., making everything seem as if it's from a human perspective. Now, this has nothing to do. So, I mean, the idea of whether animals do or do not have morality just seems to me, if we judge it from our perspective, we're going to say no, because we obviously are a different type of animal, right? And so we can't say that just because some gorilla does X, Y, or Z, therefore it must be the same morality as our own. I would argue that they do have morality. It's just in a much more general sense and a much more local
Primal.
sense or perspective to the animal in particular. Lizards have a different set of. No, they don't always eat their young, right? So lions don't always eat their young. These things happen. Gorillas, the closer you get to humanity, the more like humanity it becomes. But it never becomes humanity because we are our own reasoning creature. And that seems to me what morality is from our perspective. It's the way we reason our emotions of empathy rather than actually just express our empathy. And those are two slightly different things. And I think this is the problem with the debate in general, is that the same way we're doing that with morality, and when they talked about morality, they seem to do that. It's also the case, I think, that the analogies made towards God's behavior is that sense of exactly the same sense of anthropomorphizing God, right, and making it like human instead of saying the other way around. And when it was expressed the other way around in the debate, it was expressed as skeptical theism, which to me is somewhat of a cop out. Because all that's being said is, well, we don't know what God's like because we're not human. We're human, right? And that's the only way out of this dilemma of saying, here's an analogy. This is what God is. It's written in the Bible, right? And therefore X, Y, Z must be true as a consequence. But you can't say X, Y, Z is true as a consequence if you're going to rely on skeptical theism. And therefore, that in itself is a disproof of the genuine revelation, or the Bible as a book of revelation. That those two things don't seem compatible to me. Anyway, that was my impression of the debate in general. One side trying to press the side of trying to make the theist anthropomorphize God, and the other side running to skeptical theism and saying, well, we can't know what God's like because we're human,
All right.
and never
Thank you
shall
very
they
much.
meet.
Thank you very much. Samir had a second part to his question, but before that, Robin just reminded me of this. Coco the gorilla's last words were "fix Earth." And I don't know if you know the story. Coco the gorilla was a gorilla that knew sign language.
Yeah.
And there's a video on YouTube that if one day you're in the mood to cry, go watch Coco the gorilla and Robin Williams and then go watch the video when they told Coco the gorilla that Robin Williams had died. If you want to cry, that's like you cry instantly. If you don't cry with that, you're not human. So thank you, Robin, for reminding this and for your super chat. So, Samir, your question had a second part. Would you like to ask that now?
Yeah, sure. The second part of my question is that it seems logical that only a God in his revelations, in his books. So when I talked about religions, I talked of religions of books, religions that came with messages, religions that came with transcripts, religions that that spread around the world for one era or another. So that God, I would expect that the legislation that came down from God would be different than any legislation in the world. That God would have things like be good to thy neighbor, that God will have in the legislation not to cheat and not to lie and not to hold grudge and not to hate, and will ask you to clean yourself. For example, you wouldn't find anywhere in U.S. law that you must wash yourself every day, or any other law, or a law that tells you that you must give some of your money to the poor, or a law that tells you example. There is so many examples. I don't want to drag the question. So the jurisdiction, the law that comes from God is different than the law that comes from humans, and that law matches the scale, that invisible scale that we have in our brains. For example, you might have something that happens to you where you feel like someone, for example, when you had money you helped someone, and when he had money he didn't help you. You cannot, for example, take him to any court in the world where you would beat him, but you know in that scale that's inside you that it was wrong, and he knows that it was wrong, and the legislation from God matches what's in the scale that we all have, but the jurisdiction, the man-made jurisdiction, does not match that.
All right. Who wants to address this first?
I mean, I would once again point at like things that don't have a god, like animals. The raccoons wash their hands and wash their food. Howler monkeys will punish a sentinel monkey for sounding a alarm for a predator if there isn't a predator. Like that's punishing for lying, or bearing false witness. I don't see that a god has to be necessary for these kind of moral things to be made human, or say that they are a law of some kind that God passed on to humans, and that's why humans do these things. I would push it. I would push back against that, because we do see them in different areas of nature that do not necessarily have any kind of conception of a God.
Right, Dr.
Also,
J?
I was just gonna say, I feel like you're making a ton of assumptions about all the other religions and how unique these three are, or something. Like they're written down, like the other religions didn't write any down. They spread wide. I mean, how wide do they got to spread before they count? You seem to generalize other religions in sort of a confident manner that I am not sure you can be that confident of. To be able to categorize. Oh, then this, these three, I guess, the Abrahamic ones, I think is what you're saying. These three are
Mhm.
unique and these three are special in this way. I don't think you've justified, being able to group these and making these special above the other ones necessarily by just saying they were written down or spread more widely or something.
We have accounts of them in all three books of all these three of all previous religions.
Yeah, but
The
because they're
previous
built.
religions,
It's not all, those three are not all previous religions. They're actually quite late on the religious scene, all three. Even
Yeah.
the founding father of the Abraham character comes from a civilization which had been long established for well over, some 1,500 years to 2,000 years. By the time Abraham arrived on the scene, they'd already had laws written down over 1,000 years before Abraham existed.
Yeah, and
The
all
the
of this.
idea. Sorry, go ahead.
all of these religions are built on each other. So I would push back on you. For example, the whole washing in the Abrahamic faith, it's a ritual. It's not. It doesn't have to do anything at all with hygiene. If you look at the Bible, Jesus said that people got sick because of demons possessing them. So it has nothing to do with washing oneself. It has to do with washing oneself for God. And I have a really hard time figuring why would God care if you were dirty or clean.
Especially since our bodies aren't the thing that pass on to be with God in heaven or what have you.
Maximiliano Villa gifted 5 Matters Now membership. Thank you very much. And they have gone to David Biniel, Mark Stoney, Catherine MC, Esther 1446. Overcoming obstacles creates character. Thank you so much, other Max. And sorry, let's continue.
Max number 2.
Yes.
Samir, we would acknowledge that. I'm hoping you would acknowledge the historical data or the consensus in the historical world about previous civilizations to the Abrahamic religious civilizations.
Yes.
Okay, so there's no problem there then. They obviously have a rich history of gods and laws which they believe are handed down through the king to the people.
Yeah, you also
direct
know.
from God, right?
You also know that we believe in 124,000 prophets.
Okay, I didn't know how many there were
How
in
did
Islam.
you count them?
I can't. That's more words. Surely that's more words than there are in the Quran. So I'm not.
It's from the Islamic tradition, the 124,000 prophets.
Yeah, but
So
Right,
the prophets came to all the
is
nations.
that like the 500 witnesses? I mean, to the
Only,
resurrection.
only
the idea is that
25.
the prophets came to all the nations. These 124,000 prophets came to all nations. The names that are mentioned in the Quran are only 25, though.
Okay.
Oh, okay, yeah. So
Yes.
it is. In other words, they just say, well, there's hundreds of thousands of prophets because there's a lot
But
of people, but they
take the
don't say who they are.
The Mesoamericans, they didn't have Abrahamic faith until the conquer of America by the Spanish, the English, and so the Portuguese.
Let's not
So
forget them.
by that time, they had been doing their thing. They had their own religions, all vastly different. And the religions from the natives down here in where I am in Uruguay is very, very different than the religions from the Aztec, the Incas, the Mayans. They're all very different within themselves because these people didn't have contact with each other. And the Indians, I'm sorry, that's an offensive term. I forget. In English, it's offensive. We just say Indians and it doesn't matter. In Spanish, right? The natives here, the Charruas, they were warriors. So their myths, it was kind of along the lines of what they did, but they didn't build civilizations. They were more on the savage side. So when the Spanish came down here, they couldn't be evangelized, so they pretty much exterminated them all. And the ones they didn't exterminate was because they realized that everyone was being killed, and they just went with what was going on. They saw themselves as conquered, so they accepted it, but they got exterminated, not like in the rest of America where many more survived. But I mean, there's a lot more that to the religion than these laws, because a lot of them are not laws. For example, washing yourself, they didn't know that it had to do anything with hygiene, and there's a lot more that is ritualistic. And yes, some of them came to put an order to society, but I see that more of humans building, using religion to build a better society and to dictate norms when they still didn't have a full concept of laws like we have today. So the idea of you should do this, you should do that, and the authority to say that, they used the constructs that religion gave them.
I will say just one thing in defense of Samir, if I may,
Sure.
which is to say that I think that the or Judaism as a general rule, you try to at least provide a stability, not just for people's health, which it certainly tried to do in some respects. The proclamations about types of meat and also washing cutlery, etc., before preparing meat, although it's not, in line with modern day ideas of hygiene, was certainly a step forward to some particular practices that were going on. And then secondly, that also the idea to try to codify morality, even if it's a weak attempt, which I think it is, was done for social reasons, as well as creating what I think is very important in that religion, which is the idea of a community social net, i.e., some kind of idea of socialism, as we've come to call it in the modern world, is also quite a step forward to the previous civilizations, for which they borrowed a lot of the laws and a lot of things like the golden rule, etc., which came from previous religions. So I think there was progress made in between the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, for certain, in terms of morality and social standards. I would argue that they were pressed on by human need more than they were pressed on, or tribal need, I should say, more than they were pressed on by thinking of the good of humanity, which is how we look back at it today from our particular presentist kind of conception.
All right. Anything you want to say to that, Samir?
Yes, I'm trying to control my urge to answer every time. I just don't want to. I don't want to hog the conversation. Uh, you kind of stuck to the washing a little more, and I like almost laughed a little bit because I didn't want to have a repeat of the previous modern day debate that I was in here, where Nadir kept pushing the washing ritual thing. But briefly, I'll tell you that no, it is not spiritual washing. It is actually cleanliness, and there is a lot more to it than just washing for the prayer. And cleanliness, for example, in my religion, is a very important thing. It goes to very strict details, like not only about washing, the small washing or the big washing. It has to do with the way you eat, the way you drink, the way you sleep, the way there is rules and laws in religion for all these things. Like for example, uh, in in uh, in that time they had water in these clay jars, and the prophet had instructed his people not to drink directly out of the jar, to only drink out, and which was a common thing that people did back in those days. Uh, I wish you addressed more things in the legislation of religions that addressed moral things that were good for the society, like like and I'm not challenging the prehistoric laws. I'm challenging the law from any country in our time that would tell you to do these things, to be good to thy neighbor, to not cheat, not hate, not uh, hold grudge, to in order to be a good citizen you have to love for your fellow citizen that which you love for yourself. Some things that are good society, that make a good, healthy society, that would not exist in any man-made legislation, even in our time.
Well, I
Right.
think you might be
But
misunderstanding.
go ahead, Dr.
I was
J.
gonna say you might be misunderstanding a difference between like a religious things and like the government, because the
Mhm.
government wants things it can enforce, that it's going to make you not do anymore. and it makes you like feed your neighbor. We pay taxes and we have a social safety net, so it kind of, it does make you, feed your neighbor in a degree. So it does do that, but it's not going to legislate the heart, right? It's not going to legislate your how the government can't look inside you and decide what to do, right? So some of these laws that you say, oh, how come the government doesn't have them? They're in these holy books or whatever, and it's like, well, the government can't, dig into your heart and enforce anything, and the government only comes up with laws that it can enforce. And so if you bring up an illustration of, well, loving your neighbor, well, if you mean paying taxes, so we, therefore we can have roads and share them, or we have a social safety net, it does that. But if you're talking about you want the government to make you have this love in your heart for your neighbor, oh, that's impossible. That, how could the government ever do that? So I don't think you're making a one-to-one comparison here.
No, actually, you just made my point for me. Actually, you just made my point for me. My point is that any government can't do that. So you just made my point for me. I'm saying, that a law that would come from God, that if you follow that law, it will make you do that. When you know that there is repercussions to that in the other life, that I have to be good to you.
Okay.
And there are other religions that do that as well, right? Like every religion does that. What are you arguing
has
for?
Karma.
Yes, and here's the deal. We are besides the 25 prophets that were mentioned in my book, we're not to believe in other religions. We are just basically agnostic to them, because for all I know, they could be one of the 124,000 religions that were sent by God. So that doesn't in any way harm my point.
In one thing I wanted to
I'm still not
touch
sure what
on,
the point is.
in modern society, we don't need laws to tell people about hygiene. We just educate them and let them do the choice for themselves. We don't need to turn that into a law, because we can show them the repercussions of not brushing your teeth, of not keeping up with your personal hygiene. But if you don't want to listen to any of that, and you don't want to take a shower for a month, then that's your prerogative. We shouldn't legislate, because we also value freedom. So people have the freedom to do whatever they want within the confines of the law. So we codify things into laws that actually affect society. If Max, as a person, hasn't showered in a month, who gets the negative effects of that? Max. I showered 2 days, just in case anyone was wondering. But that's why you're looking at the perception of a law as telling people how to live, and we don't do that anymore. We let people live their lives, and we only codify into laws what could potentially lead to harmful outcomes in society.
If I can kind of agree with Samir here for a second, I do feel like we are kind of like focusing a lot on like the hygiene and the washing and the cleanliness, but like I would also then say that something like empathy does seem kind of natural to a lot of people. Of course, it's broken in some people, and like some people with like socio-mental shortcomings might not have as strong of an empathetic reaction, but like having empathy would also kind of, I think, remove the claim to a God being necessary to have that. The things like loving your neighbor like you love yourself, or treating others the way you would like to be treated, in a more broad sense. So yeah, I think something like empathy would be the kind of answer to that.
Yeah, but then we educate people on that. And then, for example, you have lust is a deadly sin. And I have never had anyone be able to explain to me why lust is bad.
Yeah.
Well, there are.
I
obviously
can if you
types.
want.
I mean,
There
I
are.
think I think you have
Yep.
pretty good arguments. Like, for example, how about if someone is involved in a committed relationship and you have lust for that person, and that person's in a committed relationship, you're going to end up basically having a Greek tragedy, or you're going to end up with like English literature, like Wuthering Heights. It's going to be a pretty disastrous situation. So, I mean,
what
I
you're
think you have
Yeah,
a really
saying
solid
or
Can I?
argument.
wait,
Can I just? I
hold
just
on,
need to
hold on.
before
But
we shift topics. Before we shift topics, I just want to go to the reason we don't need that for these days is because we have science and we've discovered the germ theory. Okay, and that's why we understand why good hygiene is good for society. Okay, now they didn't have germ theory because God decided not to give that as revelation at any point in history before the scientific method was discovered. Okay, and therefore it was important to tell people, right, that the correlation between noticing people's health and people who wash. Okay, that I'm just saying that it's no argument to say religion told us to wash, therefore religion must be true. That's absolutely no argument. If God had revealed germ theory and told us why we need to wash, that might be an argument, but that's not how it went down. People just noticed a correlation, and noticing correlation is not in line with revelation. Go ahead.
I want to reply to Isa. I understand what you say, but what if the love of your life begins by you lusting after someone who is with someone else? After a certain age, people tend to be coupled with. So after, let's say, 25 or something, if you want someone, you have to take them from someone else, and there's sometimes a way around.
Matt's
Why
Matt's is
why are you
savage over there. Oh, keep the ladies away from Max. Holy smokes.
What?
He is coming in hot.
But it's true.
I
Sometimes
don't know.
after a
I
certain
think that there,
age,
mm,
after a certain age, either you meet someone and they're single, or you meet someone and they're with someone else. And if you want to go for it, you have to go for it. There's no way around that. You
I
have
don't
to
know.
either cause them to leave their couple or just see what happens.
I
But then
wouldn't want to
again,
violate
No,
commitment.
but
I think commitment to me is such an important value that if someone is in a committed relationship, even if I love that person, if I want to be with that person, it's not appropriate because I can't violate that commitment. At least that's my ethical standard. I could not. That would be that would be like a
I'm right there
violation
with you,
for
Ethan.
me.
I'm right there with you. Yeah, like
I understand
I
that.
agree that like being committed and loyal is an absolute, like it's a necessary, and I'm right there with you. Yeah, right there with you.
And
I
I understand
understand
what
that.
you're
But
saying,
then
Max.
again,
Like I get it from a
the other
utilitarian
point
point of
is
view.
the other point is, for example, what if you lust for your wife or you lust for your current couple? Because I understand the whole thing about someone else's couple. Fine, I get that. I was just making a point that in today's world, sometimes you just can't. You just have to deal with the hand that you've got.
So when I think of lust, I think of it as this intense amorous desire. And I don't think it's necessarily this very positive good thing. It's a thing where you're driven to a sexual type of desire, and it can lead to it doesn't. So usually if you're in like a healthy relationship, you don't necessarily, that type of functionality doesn't necessarily need to come in. This usually it's about semantics. How do we define this term? So when I think of this term lust, it's this overwhelming desire to have sexual relations with another. Possibly that could be in a romantic, healthy relationship. Possibly you could argue that, but usually when we think of it, it's not usually in a very healthy context. That's why you have it like in the seven deadly sins, where they have sloth, lust, wrath, pride. These are types of qualities that in some senses may have some positive reality, but overall they're not exactly positive emotions. They usually have deleterious consequences.
That sounds very
yeah,
pure.
Isa, and also
It sounds very puritanical. Let me just say that.
Yeah,
And it's also not a
what
one
about
bullet
people
gun,
like I was
guys.
going to give the example like I could lust after like a celebrity like Gal Gadot or Anna Kendrick, and like what harm is that going to bring?
I think it then again depends on how we define lust. Is having a physical attraction with someone and just saying, "Hey, I really dig this person," or is this a person that I'm having sexual fantasies about? That's
So are we
depending
qualifying
of the
the
construct.
level of lust, or are we just
I'm
qualifying
defining.
at
I'm
what
saying this
point
term
it
lust.
becomes lust?
I'm saying, how do we define this term? To me,
Okay.
that extreme is lust. That extreme
The
is that.
extreme is lust.
All those other
Okay.
things are not lust. Those things of like saying, "Hey, I have like some light fantasy of some," I wouldn't call that lust. I wouldn't
So
fit that into that same criterion.
It becomes lust when you try and act on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other one, it's just a fantasy or a desire. For me, lust is
thought-
just overwhelming
Obsession,
desire.
right? I always
Yes.
associate with this like obsession, like this
It's an
unhealthy
obsession. You can't stop it. You
obsession.
cannot stop yourself. You must have this thing.
Right.
That's the
Because
same
once
thing
again,
like gluttony.
I'm only coming from the Christian perspective of my background. So like when Jesus said, if you lust after a woman in your heart, you've committed adultery already. That kind of thing. Like, so like, I guess like I get that there would be like a very, very, very fine line between that like extreme lust of like just about being on the precipice of acting on it and then actually acting on it.
So it's interesting that you bring up Jesus. So the reason, what I understand from Jesus is that what Jesus is calling to is a very high mystic level. So if you look at mystical teachings, and this is my understanding of mystics across the board, Jesus fits under the mystic criterion. There's this thing called, in Hebrew they call the madrega, and in Arabic they call it a maqam. You have these things called spiritual stations. So when a person is on a higher spiritual station, the types of things that they do have higher consequences. So and what Jesus is calling to in this type of narrative is a person who's on a very high spiritual station. He's not really just talking about any average Joe. And it's the thing is, how does Jesus function in the New Testament? He functions as, you would say, a sheikh or a guru. He's a spiritual guide. He's not just saying, well, everybody fits this type of standard. That's the way that I read it. He's not really just saying, like, for example, it says that, if you sin, you should cut that part that makes you sin, for example.
Yeah.
To me, reading this through the mystic lens, as a person who is like a mystic teacher, a high level spiritual guide, he's talking to people at his high spiritual level. So the people who are operating like that, it is so bad that your body part is doing this. But to a person who's on a lower spiritual level, they're not affected by these types of situations. So it just depends on your lens. So I'm reading Jesus as a high level spiritual teacher. So that it makes sense in that contextual narrative.
I want to hear from Samir why, I'm sorry we got a little bit sidetracked, but why you said that you could explain why lust is bad. And we'll see if you pass the test, because so far no one has been able to
Okay.
why lust is bad.
Samir, if you could define what you mean by lust first, because I think that's quite crucial.
But
Okay,
before that, let me just make one quick note. We're so close. We're 17 subscribers away. So share it with your friends, share it with your grandma, share it with your girlfriend, share it with your neighbors, so we can get to the 10,000 and we can plan a party. Sorry, Samir. Go ahead.
Okay. My definition, how I understand lust, is an uncontrollable sexual desire that will cloud all your thinking and that you would want to act on, that you would ignore all your other values and morals in order to act on that extreme fantasy.
Okay.
And my point is that it is not a one bullet gun. That meaning that if you have that lust, it doesn't mean that if you act on it once, that you will be out of bullets. Then it will just feed it more to where you would want to act on it repeatedly. You might get different women pregnant. You might have children in a society that are growing without father. if you cheat with a married woman, that the other man might be raising a child that is not his. You might create problems in that family and in yours. It is disrespectful to your spouse, whether you're a man or a woman. Uh, the way I see in my religious perspective is that God made me handsome at one point and made my wife beautiful at one point. I loved her at that point. I loved the shell on the outside at that point, and then I stayed married to her for all these years. And throughout all this experiment, I learned to love the person inside. So even if she gets older and she's not as pretty as she was, and now I have a belly and I'm losing my hair, she still loves the person on the inside. So there is a commitment, like Isa said. I cannot just follow my desires and go out there and lust over everyone and act on my
Mm,
fantasies. So there is a difference
okay.
between
Wait,
having
wait, wait.
silent fantasies and acting on them.
No, okay. The problem is that what I see here, and this is one of the things that people have told me before, and the reason why I don't see that this as compelling reason as to why lust is bad, is that the only thing you're worried about are the consequences. I've done pretty much everything you've said on the list. I've done it, and I have 0 children. I have 0 disease. So you can do all of these things. And if you're worried about the consequences, which is what I got from your message, there's ways to avoid that. So I
Could you
don't
could
think
uh, Max? Could you say that for everyone else that did what you did?
no, but
Okay.
I mean, the fact that some people do it is not it doesn't mean that it's inherently bad. And again, you are more worried about the consequences of some actions than the action itself. You still haven't told me why lust is bad. You have told me what happens if people are lustful and do bad things and are not careful. That's what you're worried about the consequences.
Of course, it's very simple. Anything that has the high potential bad consequences, it's bad itself. I mean, you won't say that because what you want to say, having a sexual encounter that is forbidden will feel good, would still qualify as good, even if the consequences from that are bad. Is that what the point you're trying to make?
No,
Well,
I'm trying
can
to
we,
make the
Max,
point
Max,
that
Max, Max?
yes,
He
go
did
ahead.
use the word in his definition, uncontrollable
Oh
sexual
yeah,
desire,
uncontrollable.
and I
Those
think
people
we'd
are
all
weird.
agree
Those
that if
people
you
are
can't,
the weirdest.
yeah, if you can't
So
control
it's
your sexual
self-discipline.
desire, if you can't control your sexual desire, that's going to have some negative consequences in the society around you, because that it may not be reciprocated, which is what you're kind of pointing to as your version of lust. And I
Yeah, but
think
that would be
that's
also more like addiction. That wouldn't be lust
I
on
agree. I
itself.
agree, but that's
Yeah.
Okay.
I asked him to define lust at the beginning, so we didn't have or go down this kind of
Okay.
crosstalk about what we
Oh,
mean by
Yeah, and
lust. Right? Under his
would you
definition, I think he's right. I don't agree
would
with
you
the
say
definition of lust, though.
okay? Would you say that the rapists are driven by lust?
No,
Mm,
I don't know. I don't think I'm qualified to make that qualification. We would need to get a
I'm pretty sure there is
psychologist.
a
yeah.
psychological study.
I'm
often
sorry. If you're
about
going
it's
to
an
Yeah,
cite
anti-power thing,
if you're
but
I
going to
think
cite information, I will
O
need to tell you pull it up.
O makes a good
So
point here.
I
O
think it's
makes.
a
Hang on a
case of
minute.
like
Hang on a minute.
self-control, like
O makes a
having
very good.
self-discipline.
O makes a very good point here when she says no, it's about power, and I think
Yeah,
that's
that's
but
that's
fair.
lust can fit if
psychologically
you
been
look
shown.
if you look up the
It
definition
may
of
be
lust.
it may be a component though. Go
If you
ahead.
look up the definition of lust, it is this. It's an intense craving. So it can actually lust can be an intense craving for sexual desire or even power. It's not really a term that holds very positive connotation, even if you look it up, because of its extremity. See, having a desire isn't necessarily a bad thing, but when you have a very intensified situation, I actually think about a really good representation is through anime, through
Alchemist, Full Metal Alchemist. It showcases all of these different sins, and it's really interesting, the personifications. You see gluttony, you see pride, you see wrath, and you see where these extremes go and how unhealthy they are. Like, there's a dude who is wrath, and he kills his own son in it, and it's like, it's really intense because he has this, anger, and he wants to get vengeance so much that he's willing to kill his own son, to succeed in his mission. So I think it's an interesting thing to consider, these kind of very extreme qualities. I think having a more balanced, healthy approach is a better route.
Yeah, I agree. Thinking about the lust for power, we usually would say that's bad, right? We say, "Oh, this candidate has a lust for power." I think we'd all say that's bad. But Max, I do want to say you're correct. You surely talk to a lot of people by what they mean is just having, thinking about a person, wanting to sleep with them in their mind, and that is and that alone is bad, right? Surely you've had those discussions, right? Yeah. So that I assume that's what you're talking about when you're saying you don't get why people are saying that's bad, and there are surely religious people that have told you that that was bad.
Yes, they tell me that is bad, but no one can say when I do it. And when they say that, I'm doing that to them at that moment, and they're not realizing, and that is even funnier. So I don't know. I still hold that no one has told me why lust in itself is bad. What Samir was talking is more along the lines of sexual addiction, and the consequences. And we know that addictions can get really, really bad. But in general, you can get addicted to shopping, you can get addicted to food, you can get addicted to all kinds of weird stuff. And before, when I say those people are weird, I didn't mean weird. I meant a minority. I don't know why I said weird. I said that people who take that route are a minority, because sexual addiction is kind of a thing, but it's not. Most people don't have it, and most people do have sex. So I still hold firm in my position that I still don't understand why lust is bad, in the sense of without taking it to the extreme of addiction.
Max, have you heard that like all of the 7 deadly sins are just like different versions of lust? Like lusting for like food would be gluttony, lusting for
Sleep.
rest or sleep would be like sloth, like things like that. Like some people say, lust is the only deadly sin.
No, I've never heard that, but that's interesting.
Yeah.
I don't think it would. It would apply. But the one thing I've heard is that with the 7 deadly sins, the only one that never gets what it wants is the envious, because lustful people go and have sex, gluttonous people go and eat, sloth sleep, and all of them take an action that satisfies them. The only one that doesn't get any satisfaction at all is the envious. Yeah. And that is a funny, interesting thought also.
And pride is like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You just keep building yourself up.
Yeah,
Well,
but if you
that is not true that the envious doesn't get satisfaction. I'm sorry, Max.
Yeah, Robin
I
said,
think it's more of a conceptual thing,
yeah,
Samir. I don't know if he.
No, I meant the envious will get satisfaction from seeing bad things happen to others that they envy.
Not really, because even when someone is down in the dumps, people can still be envious of you just being happy, even though your life fell apart, and the envious will still envy you for that same thing. They just change, or they will move on to envying someone else, even if they wish bad on you. And
but they could have a temporary. They could have a temporary pleasure in seeing the person that they envied go down. I can see that point.
Yeah, it's a point that Hitchens made, funnily enough.
Robin's $2. She says sexual assault is about power, and I kind of agree, but I would leave the full judgment on this. I would leave that to a psychologist. It would be an interesting chat to talk with a psychologist about the motivations behind this kind of this specific kind of violence. it would be interesting to know what drives this, and we hope we can let's get to 10,000 subs so we can get a psychologist here to explain this to us.
I would offer up my psychologist friend, but she focuses on behavioral psychology and not so much like the mental aspects of it.
Do we want to go back to the debate, or
yes? Sorry, it was just.
I had a question for Dr. J.
All right, go ahead.
If I may challenge you, sir. Towards the end of the debate, I felt that what was his name again?
Eden,
President
Luke or
Sunday,
Sunday?
or Luke?
No, Luke. Luke, great biblical name there. Luke was resorting in some of his answers to skeptical theism, of saying, and I'm sure you're well aware of what that is. If you could explain to me the benefits of doing that, because I always see it as some kind of argument from ignorance, or I see it generally as a result of an argument from ignorance.
So you don't are you just saying, like, if someone says, I don't know why God did it, you find that unsatisfying?
Well, I'm saying that if their answer is God has a justification and we're not going to know it, I find that unsatisfying.
Like, we don't need to understand why God did it, just accept it, kind of thing.
Well, it's not that we don't need to understand it, it's that we can't understand it because it's God. So it's either special pleading or an argument from ignorance, whichever way you want to look at it, depending on how you word it.
Yeah. I mean, so if you would say, like, my parents made me do something, and when I was 5, I didn't understand it, you wouldn't find that satisfying as a 5-year-old, but your parents might be right. So I'm not suggesting you should find it satisfying, right? You might not find it convincing, or you might not make it, want to have you believe in God any more than you do now, because you don't think it's a good enough answer. I can see that.
It's worse than that. I think it's fallacious reasoning.
Is the kid that says his parents made him do this and he doesn't understand why fallacious? Are his parents bad?
I think that's
is that not a good analogy?
No, I don't think it's a good analogy, because we obviously know that parents exist. In fact, they couldn't be a kid without parents, so it's not uncommon to.
So I know you don't believe
in the way of. Right, but remember when
if
people
you don't
say
believe,
this,
if you're just going to say you don't believe that God exists, so the explanation of God isn't going to work. I mean, obviously we're
no. You missed the point then. If you think I'm saying that,
okay.
No, what I'm saying is that when I say to you something like, what explains God's actions, right? And certainly, like for the case of evil, for instance, and you say to me, well, God justifies evil, or God justifies morality, and I say, well, what about evil? And you say, well, we don't know why God chose the evil world, right? And in specific, like the amount, right? So I'm trying to give a very broad spectrum kind of view of this. There is more nuance here. But when somebody says that to me, I'm saying, well, what are you trying? You're trying to prove God by saying morality needs a foundation, and yet you're not giving an answer as to how God gives the foundation.
I see.
And then
so
the answer comes back. Oh, well, hang on a minute. We can't understand how that happens because we're humans.
So are you
that
assuming
tells me nothing about the relationship between God and morality?
Yeah, sure. Are you assuming that I think that you can't have morality without God?
No, I'm just trying to give you an example. Not necessarily. You may or may not. I'm just giving you an example of how the conversation sometimes goes.
Yeah, the guy in the debate touched on that, I think. I only saw the openings, but yeah.
Yeah, so I wouldn't argue for a theistic position saying that you can't have morality without theism.
Sure.
So therefore he has put himself in a situation where he has to say, he has to sort of defend God's actions, because he's saying that his morality is like superior or something like that, right?
Right. I think the argument is not that we can't have morality; it's we can't ground morality.
Well, but it eventually gets to the same thing,
Well, that's just maybe,
right?
but
Like,
I'm
oh,
just
well, you
saying to
claim
you
you
the
have it,
point
but
of
you don't
my
really, so
point.
you're gonna,
Sorry,
kill
Not
Dr. J.
everybody, right? Like
necessarily.
that's what.
Sorry, Dr. J.
Not
My point is about
necessarily.
skeptical theism and saying, look, he retreated to skeptical theism, and as far as I can see, when people do that, when theists do that, it's not an uncommon position. A
Mhm.
lot of theists do this that I've spoken to.
Mhm.
Right, story of Job obviously is
Mhm.
a classic example of skeptical theism in the Bible. Then I see it as fallacious reasoning when it's used to try and defend a position of God.
Yeah. So you agree it's not fallacious if someone just thinks like, well, someone did something and I don't understand why, right?
Yeah,
Like
that's
if I said, oh, look,
not
the
the point.
engineer
No.
did this and it doesn't make any sense to me, but I guess I don't know why they did it. They decided to do it that way.
Yeah.
So you don't find that fallacious. You just find that fact that he's using an argument to try to defend something, and you feel like he's circling around into this. Well, I don't know why that's good or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I would just agree with you that I don't know if I would use that argument if I were him.
Okay. Why do people? When is a good use of skeptical theism? It's in the Bible, like I said, in Job, right?
Totally. So
So
yes,
when do you think it's
it
correct to use
doesn't.
it?
Yeah, I don't think it would be incorrect to say something like, "Well, God's super big and awesome, so He knows things that I don't, and so therefore, obviously, I can't give you an explanation of everything about God." Right? That wouldn't be that
Yeah.
hard. In the same way, I couldn't explain to you why an engineer built a bridge in a certain way. I don't know why
Mhm.
they did it.
Okay. And so if I ask you a tough question, and I
Mhm.
want a simple answer, right, which is
Mm.
almost an impossibility.
Impossible. Yeah, exactly.
So I'm not really actually asking you this, but you presume, presumably about morality, you'd agree then that atheists can give a basis or a foundation for morality, and it's not nothing to do with God giving us a grounding.
Yes.
Oh, brilliant, Dr. J. I love you. Okay.
I would like to welcome Mark Reed to the stage. How are you, Mark?
Hello.
Hi, Mark.
Hello, how are you? I just wanted to give my thoughts on the debate. I saw the introductions, and quite
Go ahead.
frankly, it was weird on both sides. Like
Yeah.
like both sides was kind of weird. Like it seemed like the Christian, I can't remember his name, Luke, I think it was.
Luke.
Yes. He spent more time talking about other debates and things that he had done previously with Destiny than actually putting forth reasoned arguments. Like he just sort of said, he made these conclusions about arguments, and I'm sure it made sense to him, but he didn't really explain why. He's kind of like, well, this argument, atheists can't do this or can't do that, and a lot of atheists would disagree, kind of thing. So it seemed weird, and then President Sunday sort of spent time hassling the platform he was on, which was weird. I mean,
We went through that.
Yeah, I've got issues with modern day debate and stuff, and I've aired them publicly and stuff, but I wouldn't go onto their platform and do that. It seems rude to me. Maybe it's warranted, maybe it's not. I'm not defending or castigizing his position at all. It's just kind of weird to go on that platform and do it. Yeah, just odd. So I only saw the introductions. I think that Luke, I don't know what to say about this guy. He kind of just went to these assertions that all of these arguments are fantastic. He basically said, I'll find tuning has absolutely been expressed, argument from authority, argument from authority, argument from authority. And it's sort of like, well, hold on a second. You're A, using arguments from authority. B, you're basically saying, hey, this physicist says there seems to be fine tuning, therefore there is fine tuning, which is a fallacy. If you're saying, well, it seems, it doesn't mean that there is. It seems like the sun is setting behind the horizon every day, but that's not what's actually happening. We're rotating instead. Like, just because you say seems doesn't mean is. So he kind of and just talked about all of these other debates between other people, or him and Destiny, or him and somebody else. I can't remember. It was just weird from all sides. Yeah, I don't know. And he sort of brought up President Sunday's previous debates and what he had said in previous debates, and it just seemed a bit tacky, I guess. Sort of, yeah. But that's what I thought.
Could I just add a couple of things in on the back of what Mark said, because
on my opinion of the debate, yeah, sure, Simos. Give us what I thought of the debate, mate. Yeah, sure.
No, I would say tack on the end of, not tell you what you.
Yeah. No,
There's a
I
big
get you. I'm only
difference.
joking.
English.
I'm joking.
You can tell he's Australian, can't you, everybody? Okay.
What is that supposed to mean? I haven't stolen anything in at least 5 minutes. How dare
Let me
you,
just say
sir?
the most common expression I've heard from Australian is "yeah, no." Okay, and that. But anyway, look. No, I just mean to say, yeah, I thought Luke was a lovely guy. It seemed to me. I would sit down and have a beer with him, no problem. There would be no issue. I didn't think his arguments were great. He was a kind of a baby theist in that respect, and maybe he'll harden up in due course. Whereas President Sunday seemed to me rather prickly pear, and I don't think it was a great matchup for that reason. I don't think that they went at each other in the way I would consider interesting in that sense. And then also, this is the first time in quite a while I've seen a really good debate topic title in modern day debate, which was very accurate and positive towards one side, and seemed to give great grounds for progress. Okay, rather than just pitting two sides against each other in the title and then having the free for all. This was defending the positive claim of creationism. And the one thing that didn't really happen was the atheist attacking the positive claims of creationism. So I was a bit disappointed by that, because it seemed to me there was a great opportunity to say, now defend your worldview. What is the data which disconfirms, like old Earth, and confirms young Earth? Please, could you give me the confirmation of young Earth data? And that just didn't seem to really
I never
go.
I never even got clear if Luke cared about young or old Earth of the age.
Yeah.
That they so avoided the subject. I didn't even know what his view was.
Correct.
Well,
yeah,
I didn't see all of the
said that.
debate. I only saw the introductions, but yeah,
I mean, I feel like
Did you
that's kind
get,
of refreshing, though, because like you hear so much about young Earth creationism. You heard it like done over so many times. It's kind of like nice to not have to like hear that same kind of recycled argument over and over. Like, okay,
but
well, the age of the rocks,
excited
or
for
no.
that. I was excited for just that.
I think they would have been better off with the straight, does God exist title. I think they would have had, both of them would have had a better time on it. And also, I don't like the prickly approach when you're dealing with a theist who is genuinely speaking in good faith. That to
was
me,
kind of
I
weird.
find that slightly distasteful from my side. Not to say
Yeah.
that it isn't useful when you're arguing against a presupper, say.
Mark,
But,
can I ask you, did you get bored of the debate, or did you have something else to do?
No, I was asleep, and I got up like half an hour ago, kind of thing, or maybe a bit longer, 45 minutes ago. So I kind of tuned into there. I didn't realize you guys were doing an after show, but when I saw the after show pop up, I was like, yeah, I should just duck in there. And it was just Simos. It's just because Simos was here. That's the only reason I'm here, quite frankly. It's his voice. It's his lovely English accent. It makes me feel like 10% more intelligent just being in the same room with him.
All right.
Yeah.
So we're going to do
I'll
some
send you a
final
wig for
thoughts.
some of my hair.
Okay.
Some final thoughts
thank you, darling.
before we go, and I will start with Rodney, and we'll take it around, and then we'll close it out. We've been going for 2 hours, and I don't think we have much to say on the debate itself. It was kind of short and sweet tonight, the debate. So Rodney, final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I only caught about half of it, and then the question answer time. So like, it was really short for me, but it didn't seem. I didn't so much like how they kept hopping back and forth to like metaphysical jargon and it's kind of like super cryptic thoughts and arguments. I like to be a little more concrete myself. That's just a personal thing, though. I do like the creationism and versus non-creation. I don't want to put evolution or atheistic thing opposite of it because it doesn't seem quite fair. But non-creationism, creationism, I do like the debate, the argument from both sides because I've sat on both sides now, so like I can really kind of empathize with both sides and see where both sides are coming from. I do feel like the non-creation argument has a stronger stance, and I do feel like that is the correct stance. But yeah, I do like the debate, and I do intend to be around for more of them.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. J. Final thoughts.
I liked it. Okay, it was certainly not one of the worst MDD discussions. People didn't yell; they were able to talk. They were go back and forth. I'd say its major weakness was just super unclarity on what they were talking about. So they obviously didn't talk about the said topic, and they talked about kind of random other things. And I feel like it just gave it a lack of focus. So I can remember certain arguments they had about certain arguments I've heard a million times, and I do remember that. But it would have been nice if the topic would have been clear, because at the end, if you would have been like, who won? It's like, who won what? I mean, they didn't, what exactly were they talking about? So that aspect I found frustrating.
I didn't ask that prompt because I thought it was kind of like, who can tell who won? I don't know. Isa, final thoughts. Isa?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry.
Oh, all right. No
I'm
problem.
here. It was not my favorite conversation. I definitely think it could have been a lot stronger and better. I think one thing I always like in these conversations is to get unique, novel approaches. And hearing the same stuff over and over and over again can be boring and grating and tiring, just to be transparent. I did think it was kind of funny to hear Professor Sunday. He was pretty hilarious. He's like, I don't know why I'm on what's going on with this platform. And I thought he was pretty hilarious. I was like, this guy could be a character actor. That's pretty much the most entertaining part of it. But I do think that there were some interesting ideas that possibly came up, but not my favorite.
All right. Thank you very much. And by the end, he was like, I'm not an atheist. I'm a Christian. I was like, what?
Exactly. That was hilarious. That was the best part. And then he changed it. He's like, okay, I'm a creation now, put me back to atheist. I was like, okay.
Samir, final thoughts.
Yeah, my final thoughts are that these debates will actually never solve the issue, because we can't compare oranges to apples, like Mark said earlier, because the religion stance is belief and the science is supposed to be about knowledge. But then at the end of the day, just like I listened to Tell Me More's comment at the end, because he visited both sides spiritually, or in any way you want to call it. At the end, he said he feels like this makes more sense, therefore this is correct. Something that Mark Reed had refuted earlier by saying that when a scientist says the universe seems fine-tuned, then it is tuned, and he says that it's a fallacy. This should not be taken because of the fallacy of the authority, or whatever he called it. So at the end, I I feel, and I'm allowed to say that because I come from a position that believes, I feel like both sides at the end of the day, both just believe, because science will change and both sides just believe in one position or another. Thank you.
All right.
Could I
Simon's final
address that?
thoughts?
Because you
Yeah,
did
you
mention
want to
me
go for your
directly.
outro before me, Mark?
Well, no,
Yeah.
I just want to say that you've sort of misrepresented me there. I'm sort of saying that saying, like, quoting somebody saying, well, they feel this way and they're sort of associated with the worldview doesn't mean that they necessarily believe it's that way. And plus, it seem doesn't mean feel. So I think you've completely misrepresented what I've said there. But yeah, I'll leave it with my outro. Sorry, Simon, go for it. I just yeah.
It's okay. Don't worry.
Okay. Yeah. So, like I said, I think there was a great opportunity missed by the atheists in this debate, which was to ask for positive proof for the claim of creationism, which seems to be lacking somewhat. Not to say that there hasn't been a few debates like that. I'm not saying anything like that. I agree with the panel that these questions, and I agree with Samir, that these questions are not going to be settled because they are mere beliefs rather than scientific claims. And it seems to me that that was what I was hinting at when I was talking about skeptical theism. I think also that to have a good debate is not necessarily to change people's minds, and it certainly isn't to decide a question of such philosophical pass, because there are, by definition, almost, I would say, philosophy doesn't give you definitive answers. You're right, that's science's job in some sense, and even then, the answers are not definitive. They're just most plausible. So what you ask for, Samir, in terms of giving an answer to the debate being over, it's just never going to happen. It's either philosophy, in which case you're not going to get it, or it's inductive and scientific, in which case it's never going to be certain. So I don't know. I don't know what was wished for by what you said there, Samir. And then I'm sorry to say that now because you don't have a chance to respond, but I will stay after to hear your response. And then as for modern day debates, I think when you have a debate channel like Modern Day Debate, and I've been around since the beginning of it, it's done wonders to try and create a platform where people can keep the conversation going. There used to be G Plus, where it was easy to keep the conversation going because there were plenty of people just throwing their hats into the ring. And this at least has given some structure to bring two communities which are at odds with each other together, and at least give some semblance of commonality in terms of wishing to debate. So I thank it for that. Is it doing it the best way possible? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. More no than yes, but that's not the point. The point is that it is a place that we can get diverse views talking to each other, and that's got to be good in the round. So that's my personal opinion.
All right. Thank you very much. And Mark, final thoughts.
Yeah, I think Simon's actually said a lot of really good stuff there. Especially as modern day debate brings together communities that ordinarily would just have shouting matches in rooms to engage in or attempt to engage in some kind of meaningful conversation about these issues that they don't agree on. I think too often we just have echo chambers forming, and they never talk among themselves. So I do like, at least conceptually, the idea that modern day debate is doing that. And I do like the conversations where we have really good debates between passionate people who manage to give two different viewpoints, and it's a really good debate. And as Simon says, does it do that? That's debatable itself. And yeah, I'll just sort of continue addressing Samir and what he said about what I said. So just because it may seem to us that the sun is moving across the sky, it doesn't mean that it's so. And so if I say, hey, it seems to physicists that the sun's moving across the eye. It doesn't mean that it is. I think I also have a problem with the way you've sort of defined belief and knowledge as two separate things, because they're not. Knowledge is generally justified true belief. So knowledge is automatically a belief, but knowledge generally we would say that that is justified. It has some high level of confidence due to some reasons behind it. So, and of course is true. So science is what provides that justification mechanism to the knowledge that is claimed by science. So sort of saying, hey, they don't belong in each other's fields, I'm not sure that's true. I also agree. I think it may have been Rodney that said it, that and I apologize, got the wrong person, but it wasn't a very focused topic. And I think maybe something like creationism versus Big Bang, or creationism versus evolution, something like that. Although I kind of dislike those versus ones. Actually, I really dislike the on trial sort of topics kind of thing, because it puts all of the onus. Well, not just, yeah, that as well, but mostly it's because usually in a debate, both sides would shoulder sort of some burden of proof. There may be more for one than the other, but both sides would have a, if we're doing a is God real, you would at least expect, the most of it goes to the theist, but you'd expect some of it to go to the atheist to present why they think God is not real, a negative to the proposition. So on this it's sort of something on trial, I feel like it just says, well, you shoulder all of the burden of proof, you have the positive position, there is no negative position, and you just have to justify yourself. I don't like that format generally. And even in debates where I've had that, generally I've presented some reasons or something for them to argue against me, because I feel like it's just sort of unfair for one person, the evolution on trial, it just becomes a case of, the person on the evolution side just trying to justify evolution. I dislike it immensely, but that's just me.
I agree with you.
I didn't see all of the debate, but I definitely will watch it. And thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. Too bad you arrived by the final stretch. And before we go, I have a final question for Isa. Flat Sabbath asked, he made a mistake. Isaac, he meant Isa, an infidel.
What about me?
Yes.
Cool. It's cool to be Isaac. I'm into that. I'll take on Isaac. I'll take on that name. What does that even mean? I think that's an interesting question. Like, what is an infidel? And as a person who studied Islamic theology, like, I'm going to say something that might be offensive, but there's a lot of people who peddle in white supremacy, and this is a part of this white supremacy thing, of this hyper reductionist perspective of Islam, to try to say, well, Islam calls everything infidel and hypocrite. And there's some Muslims that do that. There's some extremist Muslims who say kind of terrible things. I'm not going to disagree with that. There's extremists in every religion. But it's interesting that people try to frame this really kind of disingenuous narrative. And they say, well, because I might have different kind of perspectives on things, this makes me whatever. Does this person even know what an infidel is? They're probably trying to refer to the Arabic word kafir, which this person probably doesn't even know what a kafir is. So I'm gonna roast this person a little bit. I'm sorry, but a kafir means someone who covers over the truth. So in order for me to be a kafir, you would have to prove that I know the truth in order to cover over the truth. So this is a ridiculous argument, and it's a part of the same kind of, I would say, kind of grotesque propaganda polemics. It's stuff I really dislike heavily, but it's like a no true Scotsman fallacy, and it's a really disgusting kind of maneuver. So yeah.
All right, thank you for your answer. And I realized I missed one super chat before we go. And Take It Back Hidden, $2 Canadian, says, I've listened to natives have accepted Christianity. Yes, you listened to the survivors. The one that didn't accept Christianity got killed. So before we go, we're going to do a little bit housekeeping. And tomorrow, 5 p.m., Oz's new show, Reschooling Flat Earthers, in responses to a bunch of Witt's claims, is going on episode number 5. So tomorrow, the 7th, tomorrow, it's already today because we're past 12, but until I go to sleep, my brain doesn't reset into a new day. So tomorrow, the 7th, episode 5 of Schooling Glovers, and they're going to cover the claims that Witsit makes. And then we have a double feature because at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, that Tell Me That Story show with I Killed Earl, Isa Kabir, and myself, we're going to talk about a catalog of crazy kings. And then for Saturday, we already have scheduled the Deep Six show. I Killed Earl and Justin are going to be hosting Deep Drinks as their guest. So that will be at 5 p.m. on March 9th. And then
Max, which
we
king?
already have scheduled part 2 of what is the best society, atheist, Christian, and Muslim discussion with us, Dr. J, and Hassan Hussein, I think it is. I think it. I'm sorry, if Hassan or Hussein, I'm drawing a blank right now, but that's going to be on the 11th at 7 p.m. So be sure to like, subscribe. Let's make a push and get us over that 10,000 subscriber mark so we can throw a streaming party, do something special for you right here on Matters Now, where your voice matters. And we'll see you around. I'm gonna close the stream.